good afternoon, good morning. No matter what time you're watching this, there's always time to interview and highlight amazing people doing amazing things within our local communities. I'm Dr. Lett, and this is I'm Dr. Lett, the podcast. This next guest is someone that is really uplifting not only the Akron-Canton region, but the entire state of Ohio through it is probably easier to name some of the things that he's not involved in. So without further ado, I have the Chief Executive Officer of the Akron-Canton Airport, Ren Camacho. Ren, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon as well. Dr. Lett, thanks for the opportunity to join your podcast. Again, Ren Camacho, President and CEO of your Akron-Canton Airport. And I say yours because the taxpayers own our airport, and happy to act as essentially the custodian of the airport. So thanks for having me on.
Yes. Now, Ren, your career journey is so fascinating. I would love for you to tell the viewers, you went from really the foundation in civil and traffic engineering to an airport chief executive officer. Tell us about your career journey.
Oh gosh, how much time do we have, Dr. Lett? I was born and raised in New York City, the proud son of Bronx-born and raised parents, and raised in the housing projects in New York City, right? So you had that tough, gritty upbringing, youngest of seven children, and thankfully I had older siblings that really guided me and tutored me along the way to steer me away from those bad elements, right, in the neighborhood, as they say. And I really got started in engineering, and I'll start there, in transportation in general, looking at my father, who's recently passed, but he, with the passing, just looking back on his life, and he's 91, of course, and had all of this, grit and determination as a New York City bus driver. So transportation is essentially in my blood. So I would always go on ride-alongs with him and talk about his day. And one of the stops along the way was overlooking LaGuardia Airport. So we kind of, as he had his lunch, I'd get on the bus and we talk about his day. And then at the last stop before the turnaround, that was a spot where we see some planes take off. And sort of beyond the bus itself, that form of transportation, looking at those airplanes and thinking how cool that was. It always intrigued me how those metal tubes up in the air, just looking at the things like, man, it's quite something to see that. How does that work? It just kind of evolved into very inquisitive mind. And thankfully being good at math and science, elementary through high school, and then eventually entering college, I got a Bachelor of Science from an engineering school called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI. I believe it's the oldest engineering school in the country. That's where the gentleman that built the Brooklyn Bridge, Roebling, and Mr. Ferris, the Ferris wheel, they went to RPI. So some alumni, distinguished alumni I could attest to. So I did my bachelor's there. That's about 3 hours north of New York City, and then came down and did my master's at NYU, Polytechnic University, now part of NYU, and then quickly entered the workforce with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And Port Authority, if you don't know, they own and operate the major tunnels, bridges, airports, bus terminals, World Trade Center site in New York City. So right after school, you're exposed to all of these vast facilities and all the dynamics involved with each and every one of them. And throughout all of that, I spent about 5 years, and I spent a total of 14 years with them. And out of that, about 5 years at JFK. So I really got more ingrained into aviation and those relationships that you form with airlines and tenants and just other colleagues there of construction projects, like these massive construction projects taking place at the airport. And I always thought that time at JFK was really an atmosphere where critical infrastructure was being planned. It was dynamic. At the time, it was leading edge. Like I said, those interactions with the airlines, FAA at the time, Federal Aviation Administration, and those stakeholders was really critical to my development of soft skills as well as my leadership capabilities. So you fast forward, that was in 1993 when I joined, so I'm sort of dating myself here. 9/11, of course, happens, 2001, yes. World Trade Center, that was one of the facilities that I had the honor of working at pre and post 9/11. So 9/11 happens, and one of those goals that I had right after that event, knowing that I spent a lot of time at the airports, was really trying to make aviation safer. and really solving infrastructure, traffic challenges, transportation challenges, specifically at airports, looking at how airports serve as economic engines for their communities. And that really led me into those sort of aviation leadership roles, like project management, to eventually, running different departments at the Port Authority. So like I said, I spent 14 years there. 2008, decided to make the move, 2007, excuse me, decided to make the move to Cleveland Hopkins Airport in Cleveland, more for professional reasons and personal. I would say more professional. I just wanted a fresh start. My family, my significant other at the time was from Cleveland, so that was what made the move. Had a young family, just wanted a fresh start. Landed at Cleveland Hopkins, and again furthered my aviation skills, right? Because this is strictly an airport now that I'm working at, not these other bigger facilities that I had some knowledge of and experience with at the Port Authority. So at Cleveland, I led engineering, environmental planning teams, again further honing my engineering and technical skills. While there, I thought that I wanted to become an accredited airport executive. It's an accreditation that's provided by the American Association of Airport Executives. It's sort of like the who's who of who knows how to run airports, and I was grateful to have received that accolade, I believe in 2014 thereabouts. And then the highlight during my time at CLE was my tenure. During my tenure there was the Republican National Convention that came to Cleveland, and we had very tight deadlines, high profile projects to build. And again, gaining that further experience there, I was happy to do that. And then again, 2018, I saw another opportunity, having that accreditation, knowing that Cleveland Hopkins was not in the cards to run and operate, to manage as an airport director there. Saw an opportunity about 60 miles south down the road at Akron-Canton Airport, and put my name in the hat. And thankful to a supportive board of trustees and dedicated employees, I have had the opportunity since 2018 to combine the technical expertise, strategic planning, and that community impact as the president and CEO.
Wow, Ren, that story was absolutely incredible, and I would love to highlight that you touched on your upbringing in the state of New York and how just gritty. For anyone watching this, Ren's story, his journey, it sounds a lot like the folks in Northeast Ohio. And Ren, you and I talked before the recording, really the talent in Northeast Ohio and Ohio, it's one where folks are rising above some of the challenges and obstacles, barriers, all of that. Ren is an example of being poured into and going on to become an airport chief executive officer. Now, I would love, Ren, for you to really take us in your mind as an engineer. How has that really shaped really big picture of being an airport CEO and some of the skills and all that you touched on throughout your career journey, and how you continue to develop and grow and foster all those skills? How has being an engineer shaped you as an airport CEO?
Thanks for the question, Dr. Lett. So, thing that I forgot to mention was I did become a licensed professional engineer when I was in New York, and then via reciprocity, got it transferred here to the state of Ohio. So I was thankful to have that experience and that the ability for the Port Authority to essentially, pay for those opportunities to become licensed. Being a PE professional engineer, it really allows me to have sort of that systems thinking mindset, where you're looking at challenges through long-term planning, perhaps some risk management that is evident, something that, you just have to weigh the pros and cons of, especially in an airport environment, which is so dynamic. There are so many things going on every day. Looking at the operational efficiency of things, right? So really being organized and making decisions that balance those needs of today with investments that, of course, will benefit the airport for generations and decades to come. Really knowing that, and then really who to call, right? Who are those key people to call, those key contacts? So networking. I mentioned earlier the development of soft skills. It was so important in my time at the Port Authority, especially working at airports. You develop a lot of those soft skills. So knowing who to call, what resources to tap into. You combine that again with that long range strategic thinking, I think has all been critical to my current leadership role.
And I often have find it so fascinating to think about airports and their role within the region, how it supports the local economy. Can you tell us, when you think about the Akron-Canton Airport and how they support economic development, regional job creation, excuse me, what comes to mind when you think about, the Akron-Canton Airport and your role within that?
No, thanks for the question. I think of three things, and someone once told me that airports are places where you connect people to people, people to places, and people to opportunities.
Wow.
So I've always kept that in my mind, and I think it was an old boss that mentioned that, a former boss. And yeah, we love to, as airports, right? We fuel the local economy for the majority of locations across the country, and connecting local businesses to customers, suppliers, talent. Obviously, we want to not only attract talent, but retain talent, more importantly. Not connecting markets, not just here in Northeast Ohio, but across the world, right? You have that, you can connect here to Chicago, and then Chicago, you're in Munich, in 8 or 9, 10 hours after that connection. So you're connecting the world. Connectivity, of course, attracts investment in our region, supports tourism for major things that are going on here, whether it's an event up in Cleveland, even as far to the north and west, like at Cedar Point, and that part of the world, people interested in that sort of thing, right? They can come into CAK an hour and a half. They're at Cedar Point. People are willing to drive 3 hours for a great deal on airfare, and we do provide that, right? Job creation, both off and on the airport campus, is really impacted by what we do here. And the airport succeeds, so the entire region becomes that much more attractive and economically resilient, I think, in my estimation. And one example of this is one of our airlines that Jobs Ohio, as well as our community partners, a lot of the local businesses helped attract, was Breeze Airways. If you haven't heard of Breeze or flown Breeze, I highly encourage you and your listeners to give them a try here at CAK. They're great product, very low cost, and new airplanes, state-of-the-art features on those planes. And they committed to CAK not only with an initial 3 flights, they're up to 16 nonstops right now in just a matter of 5 years. They've become our busiest carrier, surpassing long-standing carriers that have been here for decades. And they've also established a crew base, and by that I mean their flight attendants and a lot of their pilots are living in this area, which means they're sending their kids to our schools, they're eating in our local restaurants, right? They're doing things here locally that helps, again, fuel the local economy. So those are examples of how airports fuel that, the tourism, the ecosystem that's in this area, and really as that main community asset that we know it is here and here for the long haul, right? For the benefit, again, of the community.
Ren, what I find so interesting is that Akron-Canton Airport, not only you have the airlines that are investing within the region, but also the people, and whether it's through, as you mentioned, sending their children to local schools and supporting local businesses, restaurants, all of that. I found that so fascinating because, as you and I spoke for the recording, is that you're really big on investing in the pipeline of talent that Northeast Ohio has. And of course, we're extremely biased, and this region has so much talent. Now, something that I don't know if it's highlighted enough about you is, yes, you believe in the work of establishing pipelines of this incredible talent base that we have in Northeast Ohio, but also you love giving back to some of the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. Can you talk to us about the Akron-Canton Airport's role in the pipeline building within this incredible talent base that we have?
No, absolutely. And what a couple of examples of how we do that is every year through our HR, as well as through engagement from our employees, right? Our employees, it's not the runways or the taxiways, it's our employees that are our most prized asset, right? So making sure that we provide them with the tools, the resources, the engagement, right? And the engagement meaning having them go out to the middle schools or go out to the high schools,
Yes.
whether it's through career fairs, whether it's through Akron Public Schools or Canton City Schools, and really engaging with those students to let them know that, as we talked about earlier, an airport is not just a place where planes take off and land, right? It's a city within a city, right? There are needs for, active construction projects, right? We have aging equipment. We have boilers and chillers like other businesses do, whether they're in healthcare or manufacturing, and, things break and we need people to repair them. We need to build new hangars, and again, all the things that cities have, and issues, plumbing,
Yes.
mechanical issues, heating and cooling, the trades essentially is where I'm going with that, is that there is a need at airports as well as those other sectors that could, the students to really benefit from. So we do a really good job of going into the middle schools. We keep in touch with the trade schools like RG Dredge, for example, as well as a couple of others, just to make sure that those pipelines and the connectivity is still there, the synergies are still there, to be able to have those students, whether it's through shadowing opportunities at the airports or internships with some of our tenants, or even of course airport staff as well, that they have exposure to what it is to work at an airport like Akron-Canton Airport. So having that opportunity to inspire the young people, support those local initiatives, again, whether it's career fairs or something at the airport like the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, right? For our little ones to exchange books free of charge. They're multilingual. It really helps promote the region that we serve. And like I said, we act as connectors, right, to people, places, and opportunities. We want to invest in future generations, strengthening the local economy, strengthening those relationships for those folks to think and consider, again, the airport as a place that is something much beyond, much more than, planes landing and taking off. Now, granted, that's a lot of what we do and a very key element, but I've always had the mindset that the airport should be a place other than, to come to other than flying. We have this guest pass program that we launched. It's been about maybe 2 years, maybe a year and a half now, where passengers that don't have a ticket to board an aircraft can now access a secure part of the terminal. So they have to register on our website. They come on a certain day and time. Their ID is validated. They go through the checkpoint like everyone else without a ticket, and they're able to roam through the terminal. And if they want to grab a bite to eat at the restaurant, and do a little plane spotting, or just check out, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library or our business lounge, a sensory room that we have for, those children and adults with hidden disabilities, a mother's room, a pet relief area. We're providing those bigger amenities, however, keeping that small airport feel that Akron-Canton is known for. So those are some of the things that we offer. There's a lot more to it, to the day-to-day, but it's really tapping into those future generations and really exposing them to what this airport has to offer.
Now, for anyone watching this, this is the interview you may not have known that you needed, because the airport, as Ren just mentioned, is more than just flights in and out of the region. And what's amazing and incredible is that this is another interview that fits within the pillars of this podcast: mentorship, community engagement, and leadership development. It's almost as if Ren read my mind and we rehearsed this interview. But I promise you, when you connect with amazing people doing amazing things within local communities, this is the result. So, Ren, it has truly been an honor. It has been a pleasure. And I would love for you to tell us, what is one thing you would want the community to know about their airport?
I would say, and thank you again for the question, Dr. Lett. One thing I would say is that our future is definitely a bright one. And if I had sunglasses, I'd put them on right now. We are entirely committed to our community, to creating those opportunities for connectivity, being at that economic growth engine, that talent pipeline, that access point, if you will. Maybe it's the end result, right, for a student that goes through the normal channels of education and then their first career experience is at the airport. We would love for that to happen. And enhancing the guest experience, like I said, we don't consider the folks coming through here as customers. It's more guests, right? So customers is more transactional, and we prefer to consider the folks coming through here whether they're meter greeters, whether they're travelers going through the checkpoint, part of the guest pass program. They're guests, and you have to cater to those guests as as much as we possibly can. So making sure that we do just that, keeping the airport clean, remaining that trusted partner, right? And I mentioned their service, sort of being our bread and butter and an important part of what we do. So making sure those business relationships with the big corporations, but also the small ones. We have an agreement, and I'm actually headed off to another conversation about Purple Brown, who offers local organic products right here in Northeast Ohio, and that's offered only at Akron-Canton Airport. So it's those sorts of relationships and making folks know that we do care about where we exist in the community, our relationships with our partners. And those partners, again, are middle schoolers, high schoolers, right? Educators, business folks that are flying through, and just for everyone to see that we are that safe, clean, and efficient community asset known as Akron-Canton Airport. And we'll be here for decades to come. And, I probably won't be here for decades to come, being the stage for that to continue and passing the baton, so to speak, for those coming after us. And it may very well be that middle schooler, right, that you're engaging with today, that is an airport director, a leader, right, that has those, not only has developed those soft skills, but those strategic skills, and they'll have their story, right, on as to how they came through their experiences to lead them perhaps to an airport leadership role. So if I can, again, have a small piece in that, then, I've done my job.
Yes. Well, Ren, I will say, I will consider you to have a large role in uplifting the region. And anyone watching this, I will put the website link to the Akron-Canton Airport. Check it out if you're interested in either the guest pass program or any of the other amazing amenities that Ren mentioned at the Akron-Canton Airport. Please connect. This interview has been an honor. And I will say, Ren, as someone that is the Chief Executive Officer of the Akron-Canton Airport, you mentioned relationships and the importance of fostering those relationships. So anyone out there, I will always emphasize, foster the relationships with amazing people, because you will grow, you will develop, and that all comes back to you. I promise. People poured into Ren throughout his career journey, and now he enjoys doing that to the community. And so, Ren, thank you. It has been an honor, and you've inspired someone with this interview.
Thank you, Dr. Lett. Appreciate your time as well. Appreciate it.